August 1971. The main line from Southport to Manchester. Nearby the old Southport engine shed, where the roof now didn't exactly keep the rain out and the bricks were starting to crumble, but where enthusiasm was growing for the making of a transport museum. One of the main tasks for the enthusiasts was to clear and burn the accumulated rubble of 4 years, and as the land covers over 3 acres, this meant several months of back-breaking toil. Laying rails, another job of heavy manual work. Ken Chinauer, Permanent Way Officer.
The rails, which are in 45-foot lengths, came from a glassworks in St Helens. These were lifted by weekend working parties comprised of the members. To assist in the task of removing the track, a mobile crane was purchased, also from the same place in St Helens. This proved very useful in the early stages, both in the lifting of the track and laying the early rail at Steamport. And to produce 45 foot of actual track, 2 rails are required, each weighing 3/4 of a ton, together with 18 sleepers and 36 chairs. In the first couple of years, we laid nearly 2,000 feet of track, and this was aided by our chair appeal, without which we would not have managed to produce the track.
To many, repairing an ordinary house roof would be difficult, but here, with a mixture of glass and felt, asbestos and wood, the task was formidable. As many as 350 panes of glass and 30 rolls of felt were used, mainly on chilly winter days. Many of the rainwater pipes were blocked and some had to be renewed. But enthusiasm was high, and with the volunteers working every Saturday and Sunday, and even with a total of over 31,500 square feet to repair, the job was eventually finished, to the members' great relief. Now, without water dripping everywhere, the first acquisitions could be brought into the dry, a home for the interesting relics. This tram began service in 1873 behind the clip-clopping horse on Southport's very first tramway. The knife-board seat on top had been cut down to support a shed roof when the car was used as a store for hay and lamps for the horse-drawn wagons in the coal merchant's yard in Southport, and as a tea house for the coalmen. It still retains the original advertisements. After more than a century, the beautiful mirrors are still like new. There's a world of difference between the prices charged then by the local traders and those of today, and the service with deliveries 4 times a day. The shunting locomotive efficiency was one of the first exhibits to arrive. Brendan Mullen, operating officer.
Efficient is a Barclay 040 saddle tank built in Kilmarnock in 1918. It's one of 2 locomotives owned by the Liverpool Locomotive Preservation Group, who brought their locomotive to Steamport after their site on Birkenhead docks was marooned because the track was lifted.
Steamport members know they will never have 4 3/4 miles of track like the Keighley and Worth Valley Railway in Yorkshire. The line has 6 stations and is hard to work due to the steep gradients and sharp curves. As at Steamport, many of the locomotives here are owned by individuals or groups. The line opened in August 1968 with 36 locos. A Black 5 locomotive like this is stabled at Steamport. The steam buffs think a lot of this type of loco. The workhorse of British Rail until the end of steam in 1968, pulling everything from a rumbling freight train to the speediest of intercity expresses. Steamport is gradually acquiring various examples of rolling stock, like this brake van, or this works van. Despite the lack of track mileage, the main aim of Steamport is to make the museum a working one, where the smell and noises of steam live on. They've made a good start with engines such as this one.
This is my locomotive. It's an 060 saddle tank, a Peckett built in 1953. It came to Southport in 1973 by rail and has been mechanically restored and now takes part regularly in steaming. We would prefer to use steam coal for our operating, but unfortunately this is not readily available, so we use domestic coal. On one day's steaming, this loco will use approximately 500 to 600 weight of coal. In those days, coal was £20 a tonne. Now, some 6 years later, it has gone up to over £50 a tonne.
Mind you, this train doesn't consume any coal. It's the old Southport pier train and is diesel powered. After running up and down above the sands and the briny for 20 years, the Silver Bell was due to be scrapped, so the museum bought it. An old Cheshire Lines coach which ran between Southport and Liverpool Central. The Liverpool Overhead Railway ran from Seaforth along the docks to Dingle. This coach was built in 1895 and rebuilt in 1947. When the railway closed, the car survived as an office in a Seaforth scrapyard until it was rescued by Steamport members. The coach is now used to house a collection of souvenirs of this line, which closed down in 1956 when renewal of the rusted structures supporting the track was not considered viable. Crouch Tramway Museum is another example of how Steamport members would like their museum to be. Here trams whine and clatter along a track 3/4 of a mile long, built in a former quarry near Matlock in Derbyshire. There are about 50 trams from Great Britain and abroad, including those on loan and in storage. And while Steamport doesn't hope to attain this figure, they have room to have working examples of this nostalgic form of transport. Buses, though, are something which Steamport doesn't lack. Malcolm White of Steamport's Road Transport section.
What we're trying to do is to build up a representative collection of the history of public passenger transport. It's a question of gradually collecting vehicles representative of the various stages in the development. Two identical Bradford trolleybuses, both of which operated in Bradford in the last day of trolleybus operation in this country. In the past, trolleybuses were very much more cheaper to operate than conventional motorbuses.
And here's one of great local interest. A 1934 Southport bus, cut down in 1951 to an open topper. After first touring Western Europe and later forming part of a transport collection in Devon, it came back to Southport in 1973. The old fare table is still exhibited. You could go quite a distance for 3 halfpence in those days. Restorative work on engines is often required when a bus is to be kept in running order. All these buses are in their original liveries, which are not seen on the streets anymore. This Blackpool Tram was built in 1953, but was found to be not as economical as the pre-war cars, which are still in operation. Inside and outside the building, the history of road and rail transport comes back to life at Steamport.